We all have inner demons. Part of maturing as an individual is accepting the existence of your shadow self. We can either live our lives in total rejection of these shadow demons, or we can harness their power and make peace with them. That's how we unlock our true potential. Picture your shadow as a dragon in a cave that protects gold, and you have to find a way to tap into that treasure. The practice of shadow work allows us to unlock this hidden potential and tap into the power of your being as a totality, beyond the confines of ego identification. Picture the psyche as a sphere or an abstract egg with multiple layers. One of those layers is known as the shadow. At the top layer of the psyche, we have the persona, which is the mask we have to wear in our daily lives as individuals in a society. Below that is the ego, the conscious part of the psyche. This is the identity of yourself that you create in your mind. The I as opposed to the you, which is the other. The ego is essentially the psychic function of separating the inner from the outer, the microcosm from the macrocosm. Below the ego, we have the personal unconscious functions, the shadow and the syzygy, anima for males, animus for females, which represent the opposite sex in your unconscious that balances your psyche. As we go deeper into the psyche, we encounter the collective archetypes that we all share as humans. These archetypes are personified in myths, heroic stories, and art in general. At the center of the psyche, we have the self with capital S, which is the archetype of wholeness, the totality of being and non-being, substantiality, God, the Tao, or the All. Once you understand Jung's structure of the collective unconscious, the archetypes will become apparent in your day-to-day awareness. One of the most integral parts of personal development and self-knowledge, according to Carl Jung, is confronting the shadow within. The shadow is the side of our personality that we hide while promoting the side we think we are. We identify with this ego identity and develop its masks, and reject the shadow, so it develops on its own behind our conscious attention. In other words, the shadow is a function of the psyche that operates independently from the ego, especially when we are completely unaware of its existence. The shadow is comprised of the primal drives and urges in the depths of the psyche, the animal instincts. It belongs to the chthonic realm of darkness and pure potentiality. When the ego, being the avatar of the light, directs attention to the shadow, the sheer darkness can be so overwhelming and frightening. That's why most of us refuse to accept the shadowy aspects. We instead find scapegoats in the external world that we blame for the dark side we choose to refuse to accept in our internal world. In relationships, shadow projection can manifest in various ways. For instance, someone struggling with trust issues might constantly accuse their partner of being untrustworthy, projecting their own fear of abandonment. Similarly, someone repressing their anger might perceive their partner as overly critical, attributing their own unexpressed anger to the other person's behavior. Beyond personal relationships, shadow projection plays a significant role in societal dynamics. Prejudice, racism, and political polarization often stem from projecting our collective shadow onto other groups or ideologies. Judging entire groups based on the actions of a few or demonizing those with opposing views are examples of this phenomenon. It manifests as conspiracy theories and terroristic outbursts. Recognizing shadow projection in ourselves and others is crucial for fostering healthier relationships and building a more understanding society. As Jung wisely noted, the best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our shadow onto others. If the shadow goes unchecked, we risk walking around and projecting it on others. We refuse to accept the fact that it takes one to know one. In other words, we are only capable of noticing the inadequacies of others that reflect our own shortcomings. If you're resentful about someone or something, remember that the emotion springs from your own soul, which is not something trivial. We are essentially the story we tell ourselves about ourselves and others. In this regard, Carl Jung states the following: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Carl Jung. The mask we wear plays an unfavorable role when rejecting the aspects of the personality associated with the shadow realm. The mask that we show to others clouds the view in front of the ego and projects an inward and outward shadow. In regards to shadow integration, there are a variety of approaches. In the old days of humanity, initiation rites were an extreme form of shadow integration and even a symbolic death and rebirth. Shadow work is one of the stages of the individuation process. You can incorporate some techniques into your daily life that you can consider as initiatory practices to shadow work. Journaling is the gateway to shadow work, especially if you record dreams too. You don't have to make it feel like a chore. You can just grab a pen and a notebook whenever you feel like it and just let the words write themselves. You'd be surprised to realize that you have a lot to say, or at least your unconscious mind does. The key is to be honest with yourself and not judge whatever comes. You can also directly address the shadow in your writing. Try to ask it questions and see what comes. Another practice is to close your eyes and imagine a past version of yourself from a time when you felt deep shame, anger, rejection, or inferiority. Phil Stubbs says, "It is the part of you that you wish you were not, but you are. And not only that, you can't get rid of it." Talk to your shadow and ask how she feels about you in the present and see what answer comes. Then ask your shadow how you can reconcile with it. When you do this practice genuinely, you receive answers all of the time. That's why journaling is very practical, because you can always return to those notes and think about things in retrospect. It helps you realize that tragedy plus time equals comedy actually makes a lot of sense. One final practice that you can incorporate is assertiveness training, which you can do on your own or with the help of a friend you think is assertive. The trick is to be very blunt and unapologetically honest when you need to. Avoiding conflict and aggression through lies and hiding the truth is one of the most brutal things you can subject yourself to. That's how the shadow takes a firmer grip. Don't be afraid to show your teeth from time to time when it's necessary. Repressing negative emotions all the time just to satisfy some arbitrary societal norms is unhealthy. The lesson here is to keep balance. It is the balance of light and dark, positive and negative, day and night that sustains the earth, the structure of an atom, as well as our psyche. Keep a positive and pleasant mindset, but always be aware of the negative emotions underneath the surface. Paraphrasing Carl Jung, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." In regards to balance, Paracelsus, who's probably the most influential alchemist in the West and also the father of toxicology, once said, "Everything is poison. There is poison in everything. Only the dose makes a thing not a poison." Paracelsus, though it's associated with the negative aspects of the personality, the shadow isn't necessarily our evil side. You become more aware of your behavior and take charge of your emotions in a better way. Instead of drowning in the seas of unconscious emotions, you become a sailor. Being tricky to spot in ourselves, the shadow requires us to think outside the box, which is our ego consciousness. The shadow may be a representation of our primal animalistic urges, but it is also the root of our creative drive. The language of the unconscious is often symbolic. That's why it often finds expression in symbolic language, poetic expression, and art. As Jung once said, "That which we need the most will be found where we least want to look." He also encouraged his patients to follow creative and artistic endeavors throughout the individuation process. Integrating the shadow is a creative work of art. When you travel to the realm of the shadow and face your inner monster, and even become friends with that beast, you always bring back gold with you in the form of a more wholesome attitude towards life. An attitude that embraces both chaos and order, dark and light as complementary forces, not mere opposites. The shadow is beyond good and evil. Only our immature perspective and our desperation to fit in with what we think the world wants us to bring suffering and evil to our experience. The psyche is the product of the interplay of opposing forces that cannot be reduced to just good and evil or appropriate and inappropriate. Society sometimes misses the point behind life by putting arbitrary rules that provoke the shadow, which in turn rebels and wreaks havoc in the form of war, violence, rapes, social unrest, and so on. That is the collective society's shadow projections. Your role as an individual is to dig beneath the surface and embrace your shadow because it's essentially you, perhaps even more you than who you think you are. To learn more about the unconscious mind and how to tap into it, make sure to subscribe to our channel for future videos on this topic.